All right, today let's talk about Deepak Chopra, and not just him, but really him as a case study for how America has the least regulations for spiritual but not religious, and how that's starting to cause all kinds of harm in America outside of religion. But first, let's talk about Deepak. Now, for the record, I have not been a fan of this guy from the very beginning. I truly believe that no one has confused the conversation around spirituality and consciousness or spirituality and science more than Deepak Chopra. Deepak says things with his full chest like, quote, cancer is not a physical disease alone. Cancer is the final stage of a process that begins with your thoughts, or correct your consciousness and the cancer will correct itself. Chopra frequently claims that you can change your DNA with your mind. He calls it quantum healing. Mindset can change behaviors, hormones, stress levels, but we have no evidence that mindset can actually rewrite DNA sequences. Epigenetics is not the same as altering DNA through your thoughts. And he also uses epigenetics as a buzzword to suggest limitless self-reinvention. Or he will say matter is an illusion created by consciousness. And yes, that is one theory for how matter and consciousness interact, but there's at least 20 other solid theories on the table that we are considering, and no one knows yet for sure how and why consciousness and matter interacts. You'd have to literally know the nature of reality to know that, and I don't think anyone knows that. And the people who most study this question, like the people who have been studying this question for 40 years, really just admit to their ignorance. So I have not been a fan of Deepak Chopra from the beginning, but let's dig into the allegations. So in November 2025, last month, the US House Oversight Committee released a bunch of Jeffrey Epstein emails and documents. And in that treasure trove, Deepak Chopra shows up as one of the many high-profile people emailing with Epstein after Epstein is already a registered sex offender. And the documents show that there's emails between 2011 and 2016. Epstein invites Chopra along with some other people to his New Mexico ranch. Their tone is friendly and personal. Sometimes Chopra signs off love or includes hearts or affectionate emojis. But the one that's really concerning is an exchange that happened in November of 2016, where Jeffrey Epstein forwarded Deepak Chopra a news article, and the article reported that a woman who had filed a lawsuit accusing Donald Trump and Epstein of sexual assault had dropped the case. This was the well-known Jane Doe lawsuit filed in California and then refiled in New York, alleging that Trump and Epstein had assaulted her when she was 13. And the case was dropped in November 2016. So Chopra says, has the case against you been dropped? This shows that Chopra clearly understands that the article might affect, Epstein's own legal exposure. Epstein replies, yep, and Chopra writes back, good. So the question is, one, why are these two friends if you are a spiritual leader and he's already a registered sex offender at this point? And why are you happy that a case was dropped when a 13-year-old girl claims to have been abused? And of course, Chopra is just dismissing these allegations. He doesn't give us any context to this. And so apart from that exchange, we also have records that show that Chopra appears several times in Epstein's calendar and appointment logs, that Epstein scheduled meetings and dinners with him between 2016 and 2019. And then we also have, separate from the Epstein emails, we have personal allegations against Deepak Chopra. So in 2021, an anonymous woman published a long, very detailed essay describing her time as a vulnerable young client at the Chopra Center in the late 1990s. She said she went there to recover from addiction and trauma. She saw Chopra as a spiritual authority and healer. And then, as you can guess, he allegedly crossed boundaries in therapeutic sessions, told her that they were karmically connected, that he was falling in love with her, took her to a motel for sex while he was her spiritual advisor and the head of the center, and continued a secret sexual relationship while she was still a patient and client struggling with addiction. And so what this is signaling kind of beyond Deepak now is this much bigger, very under-discussed cultural pattern in America, that America is the least regulated spiritual marketplace in the developed world. And that has massive consequences for people who are spiritual but not religious, which is a growing number in America. Trauma survivors, spiritual seekers, basically anyone looking for meaning outside traditional religion. And so people are leaving organized religion because they're seeing, the sex scandals and the trauma and the dogma and the abuse and all of this stuff. And then they get into the spiritual but not religious crowd, and it is less regulated than religion. This is starting to cause major problems in America. America has almost no guardrails for spirituality outside formal religion. So, unlike medicine, therapy, finance, education, or even yoga instruction in some companies, spirituality in the US requires no licensing, no ethical boards, no mandatory reporting, no credential verification, no consequences for malpractice, no protection for vulnerable populations. You can reinvent yourself as a spiritual teacher, an energy healer, an intuitive coach, an ascension specialist in about 48 hours. And then you can diagnose someone's trauma incorrectly. You can give medical advice while claiming that you're not giving medical advice and essentially walk away untouched. And this is unheard of in Europe and Australia and parts of Asia, where we have government regulations, consumer protections, and even cult watch organizations that actively monitor the spiritual wellness industry. But in America, it's the Wild West. We have literally nothing. And so to me, even though I've not been a fan of Deepak Chopra from the beginning, I think he's problematic in his character, and I think he's also problematic in the way he talks about spirituality and science. But the Deepak Chopra Epstein correspondence, I think, is a symptom of something bigger than just him. Not because Chopra, I know, committed a crime. So far, there's no evidence that he did. But what this really shows me is this signal, these flags that we're getting from the spiritual industry, that there's no ethical infrastructure here to assess conflicts of interest or power dynamics or boundaries or background checks for anyone who calls themselves a guru. Which means, let's say that the Epstein files comes out and there's more evidence of something fishy. There's really no board or government agency that can bring charges against someone like Deepak Chopra unless an individual goes up, against him for abuse. There's really no way to stop what he's doing in the spiritual world, even if he, becomes more problematic than he is. And so there's other areas now also starting to give me concern than even organized religion. At least in organized religion, you have access to thousands of years of critique. You have TikTok, where you will hear people who have been hurt by your religion. You'll have to wrestle with that. There's debates between atheists and theists. You have probably access to, unless you're in a really isolated situation like Jehovah's Witnesses or Amish, you probably have access to some critique. But in this new Wild West of spirituality that's operating with no ethical guardrails, this is new because we have no history of critique for people to access to be able to make good choices. And so here are some areas that I have my eye on that are really bringing up ethical concerns that for me are sometimes on par with organized religion. So the first one on my list is what's going on with the ayahuasca retreats, especially we're watching this in Colorado, where we're having psychedelic tourism, which is this booming, totally unregulated industry causing deaths and abuse and exploitation. So America has seen underground ceremonies run by people with no medical training. There will be shamans who have fake Amazonian credentials. And the reason it's so important to access communities who have a history with these drugs is because they know what to look for and how to integrate. And they have a history of what to do in these really intense mind-altering retreats so you don't lose your goddamn mind. And then we have sexual abuse during ceremonies that have happened while participants are vulnerable or incapacitated. We have retreat centers with no EMT equipment, no screening for psychosis risk or, schizophrenia risk, heart conditions, drug interactions. We have several American deaths in U.S. retreats due to serotonin syndrome, aspiration during vomiting, interactions with SSRI medications, dehydration, irresponsible dosing, untrained facilitators. And so we have the big lawsuits are happening in California and New York, especially for rape during ceremonies. And so this psychedelic boom combined with zero regulation has made this one of the most dangerous spiritual but not religious subcultures. And I'll be honest with this one. I'll be a little bit vulnerable with this one. I did a Jungian training for psychedelics. I did an online training for psychedelic guiding, and I apprenticed with 2 different guides for 6 months before I guided someone. And even so, even though I've tried to do some qualifications to be able to feel like I can guide someone with plant medicine, I stopped doing so. I now refer those requests to someone near me who has an incredible amount of training and knowledge, who has worked with indigenous communities. She's learned how to grow it herself. I refer people who ask for that to her. And then there are times where I will do the integration session afterwards, because that is under my umbrella of training as a spiritual director. And I ethically feel better about that, because there was one time that I was apprenticing and the woman was in a terrible marriage. She was actually married to a therapist, which actually makes me hate this guy, but he was essentially using her body to emotionally regulate himself, and he demanded sex. And she had 30 years of this marriage of her body essentially saying no to sex, but her, but saying yes because she's in this marriage. And so when she was in the trip, her breasts and her genitals hurt, and it was almost like for hours that she was being raped, because she had all that repressed trauma in her body screaming at her that, like, I am not okay. And so we got her through it. I was apprenticing at the time, so I wasn't in this situation by myself, which I would have been totally unqualified to handle, as someone who's not a therapist and certainly not a trauma therapist. But the person I was with was qualified, and I was apprenticing, and we got her through it. She ended up getting divorced, if you want to know the end of that story, and she's doing great. But for me, I knew that even though I had done some training to sit with people, I knew that I would have to have more training in trauma before I did another guiding session. And so I haven't done one in a long time. And this is an area where it's so easy, especially with friends who want to try this, to just be like, yeah, I'll come sit with you and make sure that you're okay. And then I realized later, as I got more sucked into it, that this is not something that ethically I should be doing. And so I stopped. So this is one where, like, sometimes with these ethical things, I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of it. I'm on top of it. I feel like I'm in the clear. And then there's sometimes I have to be honest, where, like, I've made some mistakes along the way and I've had to learn. And this is an area where I've had to learn, because you just get so many it can be so life-saving for people, and these are friends and who want to try, and I feel like I've had some training, and so it just felt like it's a good thing to help people by sitting with them for their trips. And I just realized over time that it's not as ethical as I would want it to be, and so I stopped. Another big concern is wellness gurus who have no medical training giving medical advice, alternative medicine influencers causing measurable harm. This is energy healers telling cancer patients to quit chemo, TikTok breathwork gurus telling teens that they can cure their trauma, and then the teens like hyperventilate, trying to do this breath work. Influencers promoting untested detoxes, metabolic resets, quantum cleanses. The liver detox industry surged from 2020 to 2025, and hospitals reported spikes in liver failure because of these cleanses. We have several deaths tied to prolonged water fasting in retreats, especially when combined with heat, like California and Arizona. Erin Gall is a wellness influencer. She told her followers to stop ADHD medication. And then we have people like Wim Hof. Wim Hof has a number of deaths that he's been sued for, because people will do breathing exercises with cold plunge, but then pass out from the breathing exercises and drown. Not to mention, Wim Hof has physical and emotional abuse allegations from his former partner and their children. But the wellness industry, he's been untouchable, even with multiple deaths that he's been sued for. The major one for him was in 2022 with a 17-year-old girl who drowned in her family pool after doing Wim Hof breathing exercises. So the wellness industry I've covered before, because it's essentially considered one of America's newest religions. It's essentially acting like a religion. And so it is one to watch. Next on my list is manifestation culture becoming an economic scam. Examples would be like high vibration coaching, charging, $5,000 a month. Law of attraction leaders that are teaching that poverty is caused by low vibrations. I literally had a lady on TikTok tell me that homeless people wouldn't be poor if they knew how to manifest, which is problematic for so many reasons. Influencing, telling followers to take financial risks, to invest in crypto, to start coaching business they aren't qualified for. It's caused real people to drain their savings or get into debt or lose homes, but there's zero consumer protection because it's labeled spiritual. And if it's labeled spiritual in America, we don't touch it. Like, there's no way to sue for false advertising here because we essentially have no precedent. Another big one is the sexual abuse that's happening in yoga and meditation communities in America. Again, no oversight, so predators thrive. We've had major scandals. We've got Bikram, if you've seen the documentary on that, multiple sexual assault allegations to the point that he fled the US. Kundalini yoga, that guy, a long list of Zen Buddhists and mindfulness teachers have been accused of misconduct. I interviewed a lady, I did a podcast with a lady who is on TikTok under the name Life After Zen about how much sexual abuse and control there is when you are a woman and have a yoga or meditation teacher, especially if you're living on site or if you're in a retreat situation. And she raises awareness because there's this misconception that, oh, those things happen in Christianity, but not Buddhism, not Hinduism, not yoga. And absolutely those power dynamics still breed abuse in those communities. These communities almost never have an external review board, HR departments, reporting systems, safeguarding procedures. And one of the reasons I'm really concerned is that, again, in Christianity, like even the most average Christian, even the most conservative Christian knows that there's some people who abuse in Christianity, like they admit to that, or we have the whole history of the Catholic Church. But when you are leaving religion, just going into a yoga studio, you don't really know what to look for. You don't know sometimes about these power dynamics and what safeguards need to be in place, or you are potentially, at risk for abuse, especially in these teacher-student relationships. And so it can catch a lot of people off guard. Another group I'm watching is like the channelers, the mediums, the quantum healers. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry in America of essentially unverifiable spiritual claims. People have spent thousands of dollars on past life regressions, trauma extraction, energy cords removal, mediumship, contact with dead relatives. I have an aunt who does this actually. Quantum healing, mRNA activation. Like, yeah, that's a real thing. And because, again, the US has no consumer protection laws for anything under the umbrella of spirituality, no accreditation, minimal fraud regulation, it attracts essentially the worst bad actors. In fact, someone just recently sent me a video of Kim Kardashian saying that all of her 4 psychics are all liars because they all told her that she would pass the bar and she didn't. And now, like, we laugh at that because, like, it's Kim Kardashian, she's got money, but most people don't have Kim Kardashian money. So you get the idea. Like, there's tons of other examples. But let's talk about now, why is the United States the least regulated space for spirituality? How did we end up here where we're essentially in the spiritual Wild West? So first of all, we have the separation of church and state. And so the government can't regulate spiritual claims. We're very pro-spirituality, pro-faith here. And so we don't have a history of the government having the power to really regulate anything when it comes to spirituality. And when we talk about separation of church and state, there are good things, but other countries have allowed essentially the state to be able to check the churches. And we don't have a history in our country of the government essentially having the power to do that. I keep saying the word essentially, by the way. That's got to be super annoying. I'm going to not say that word for the rest of the time. Another reason that it's happening here is hypercapitalism. So spirituality becomes a marketplace with no rules. Another thing is just our individualist culture here, that people are starting to distrust institutions. We have low social trust in our institutions, and so we're seeking alternative authority figures. We also have an issue with therapy shortage and the cost of therapy. And so people are turning to untrained healers to just try to get some help with their lives. And then we have tech platforms that give gurus this kind of infinite reach with zero accountability. So this combination is uniquely American. Europe, Japan, Australia, and Canada all regulate parts of the spiritual marketplace that the US leaves completely unmonitored. Now, some of you might be thinking, isn't this you, Britt? Like, aren't you in this category? Yes and no. Yes, I am in a very unregulated space. And yes, if I wanted to start a cult, I could. And people would probably show up if I organized it, especially if I organized like, hey, I got a cabin, I'm doing a psychedelic retreat. Why don't you guys come? I don't have a governing board. If I give bad spiritual advice for a client, I don't have someone above me to put me on leave. I don't have an HR department to say you need to take a class on this because that was really bad advice, which means in America, to do healthy spirituality, you have to enact your own guardrails. And that includes the people working in that includes the people who are wanting spiritual advice and also the spiritual advisors, because this is the Wild West. So I have 3 advisors or mentors that I refer to. One is Jim Palmer, who's a spiritual director. He runs the Center of Non-Religious Spirituality. He's the one that I'm doing a cohort with, where I'm teaching essentially. Oh, I did it again. See? What is this with? Why do I keep saying this word? I'm gonna have to think about why I'm so obsessed with that word. So I'm doing the cohort with him of 60 people, where we are teaching them to become spiritual directors. He is one of my mentors. Another is my mystic teacher, who is my Sufi teacher. And another is an old lady named Lizzie, who is a crone in my life, a woman with incredible wisdom. She taught anthropology in college. Now she runs a witch coven, just very earthy and wise, but also very no nonsense. And all people of just character and wisdom, who I will ask questions to, maybe about a client or what to do with my business or what they think of something, and people that have their eye on me to call me out on my shit. I also could have just called myself a life coach and started doing what I'm doing, but I did go out and get a master's degree in theology, and I did an 18-month program in spiritual direction, even though in America it's not required for what I do. Nobody has ever asked me for my degree on the wall or anything. So I could have just gone on TikTok and started talking and taking clients under the umbrella of life coach. I chose not to, because I wanted more qualifications than that. I'm very clear online and also with my clients what I can and cannot address, as far as what is more appropriate for a therapist. And if you notice on my social media, I don't speak about things outside my education and expertise. So once in a while, people will say, why don't you speak more about Hinduism? Why are you always speaking about America? My expertise is specifically theology, with a focus in the future of American religion. And so I speak mostly about that. I've noticed this I call this the Jordan Peterson effect, that you get a large following and you start answering people's questions that want your advice, but then you start going outside your expertise. And so sometimes I'm asked a question, and even though I have an opinion, I will force myself to say I'm not qualified to speak intelligently on that, even though I do have an opinion, because I don't want to become that. And with clients, I always have to be giving their power back to them rather than becoming their prophet or guru. So I have to consciously make sure that I'm always decentering myself as the authority, that I'm your companion. I'm just a companion on this journey with you. I don't make big claims or promises that I can cure anxiety, or that I can unlock energy or manifest whatever, or cure trauma. I simply say, here's where I've been, here's what I've experienced, here's my education, here's my expertise, here are some tools that I've gathered that I think help make me a good companion, and I don't promise more than that. There are some money opportunities that I also don't touch that I could. I don't sell t-shirts. I don't do branding. I should probably get a logo. I don't even really have a real logo. I don't do brand deals, even though I've been offered some. I don't overcharge. I think I don't overcharge for my courses. I try to charge an amount that allows me to keep the lights on, but not take advantage of people. It's a path that I don't want to go down as far as ethics. I don't have any gray areas when it comes to sexual boundaries. I've never dated a client or anything like that. I refer out for active suicide plans. That's something I've only had to do once, or, active psychosis, addiction, legal advice, marriage advice, trauma therapy. I'm not qualified. So I have a Rolodex of people that I refer to ready to go. And I also never work in isolation. Unethical spiritual leaders isolate their people. Don't talk to skeptics. Don't tell your therapist. Stay inside this community. They don't understand your spiritual path. I really do the opposite. Get a second opinion, bring this to your people, ask your therapist, test everything that I say. Isolation really breeds abuse. Openness creates a lot of safety. And really the big thing is that I just don't sell certainty. Certainty is the most addictive substance in America's spiritual marketplace. Ethical spiritual direction encourages doubt and nuance and ambiguity and experimentation and being wrong and changing your mind. But the problem is, even if I'm doing this right, which I do try, I really am trying to create strong ethical guardrails so I don't become a Deepak Chopra type. It's only there because I create it. And that's a bad system in America if the only ethical spiritual workers have ethics because they have to kind of create it from scratch themselves and are also their own overseer, with this much power and money in American spirituality, it's like putting a kid in a candy store and trusting that the kid knows when to stop. And that's the part that is scary, that if I actually did wanted to go down an unethical spiritual path, especially if I wanted to make a lot more money than I do, that I could go very, very far down that path before anyone could try to stop me if I really wanted to in America. So this is where we are. We have the most deregulated spiritual marketplace in the developed world. We have a long American history of snake oil and tent revivals and miracle cures. And now we've put all that on steroids with the internet and late stage capitalism. And we used to at least pretend that there were referees, you know, the priest, the rabbi, the pastor, the denomination, the hospital board, the licensing committee. Yes, they often failed, sometimes spectacularly, but they at least existed, right? And we read about these stories where you go to talk to someone about abuse and they cover it up. We don't realize that we don't read the stories where they went to the board and the board actually did something, or the pastor was put on leave. Like, that does sometimes happen. It really does. And so now we have this landscape where anyone with a ring light and a trauma story can become your next guru. And if it goes badly, there is no one to call. There is no bishop. There is no board. There's not even a chance that you will be able to stop what's happening if it's abusive. And the uncomfortable part is that it's not going away. The government is not going to start licensing mystics in Denver, teaching you how to speak light language. There's not going to be a department of quantum healing with a complaint line. In America, the separation of church and state plus hyper-capitalism plus just our obsession with the government not touching anything related to spirituality and religion means that this spiritual Wild West is baked into the system, which means the scary thing is that the only real regulation left is us. So if you are listening to this and you are spiritual but not religious, you are not just the consumer in this marketplace, you are the peer review. You are, the BBB. You are the red flag guy. You are the ethics committee. Your job is to ask annoying questions. Where did you learn this? Who holds you accountable? What happens when you are wrong? How do people leave your community? What happens when someone says that they've been harmed in this community? And if a spiritual teacher cannot kind of sit with those questions, then you already have your answer. So if you ever see me going down a path where I lose your respect, I hope that you tell me. There's going to be times where you disagree with me. That's fine. I disagree with myself. I get memories of things that I say on social media where I'm like, I'm not sure I would say it that way today. I disagree with myself, or I would debate with myself, or there's more nuance, or whatever it is. So there's going to be many times, even if you resonate with my voice or my story, there's going to be many times where you disagree with me. That's fantastic. But if I ever start, as I'm trying to create a space to do healthy spirituality with people, if I ever start going down a path in these business decisions that I have to make where I lose your respect, I do hope that you tell me. And so that's it for me for No Nonsense Spirituality. Not a fan of Deepak Chopra, but Deepak Chopra is I think he's a small fish in this much bigger pond of America having the most unregulated spiritual community, which means that you are the ethical guardrails for spirituality. That's it for me. See you next week.